All right, so get ready because today we're diving into something super important, especially these days, with the world becoming more and more globalized. And it's all about clear communication when when English isn't everyone's first language.
It's so true.
Yeah, and to help us break this down, we're going to be looking at this really insightful article, and it's from IEUSA Insight.
Oh, okay.
And it's called English May Be Your First Language, but it's not everybody's.
I've heard of that one.
Yeah. So think of this deep dive as like a crash course in, how to bridge those communication gaps and really make sure everyone is on the same page, understanding each other.
Yeah, because it's so easy for things to get lost in translation.
Exactly. And to really highlight this, the article starts off with this real life story.
Oh, I love a good anecdote.
Yeah. And this one is actually, it's kind of funny, but also a little bit cringeworthy.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
So it's about this Korean woman who's trying to activate a credit card.
Okay.
Right? And she's talking to the customer service rep, and the rep keeps asking her, "Are you Prowhole?"
Oh, yeah, I think I know the one you're talking about.
Yeah.
That's a classic example
Yeah.
of how pronunciation can totally throw someone off.
Right.
He was actually asking if she was the primary holder on the account.
Oh, wow.
But to her, it just sounded like gibberish.
It's so easy to forget that as native English speakers, we do all sorts of things without even realizing it.
Oh, absolutely.
Like blending words together,
Yeah.
or dropping syllables.
Right.
And we just kind of assume the other person will fill in the blanks.
It's like we have this secret code that we're not even aware of.
Yeah, exactly. And for someone learning English, it must be like trying to decipher a foreign language.
For sure. The article actually gives this funny example later on. It says, Jew eat. No, Jew.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And it seems totally absurd to us,
Uh-huh.
but that's often how we actually sound to non-native speakers.
That's wild.
Isn't it?
Yeah, it makes you realize how much we take for granted.
You know, it really does.
So one of the big takeaways from the article, and something I think is so important to remember, is that speaking a second language isn't just a yes or no thing. It's
Right.
not like you can just check a box and say, okay, I speak English.
It's so much more nuanced than that.
Exactly. Like
Yeah.
there are so many levels of fluency and comfort, and we can't just assume that someone understands everything perfectly just because they can hold a conversation.
Absolutely. Linguists talk about this all the time, the difference between what we call BICS and CLOP,
Oh, I've heard of those.
basic interpersonal communication skills versus cognitive academic language proficiency.
Yeah.
Someone might be able to chat with you about the weather, no problem, but then really struggle to follow along in a technical meeting.
Right, or like understand a complex email.
Exactly. Or keep up in a really fast-paced brainstorming session where there's a lot of jargon being thrown around.
That's a great point.
It's all about recognizing that there are different levels of understanding,
Yeah.
and we need to be sensitive to that.
Absolutely. So then how do we actually bridge this gap?
Well, that's where the article really shines. It lays out 4 practical tips
Oh, perfect.
for improving cross-lingual communication.
Mm.
And these aren't just for the workplace either.
Right.
They're valuable for anyone who wants to be a more mindful and effective communicator in any setting, really.
Okay, so tip number 1 is when non-native speakers fake it.
Oh, this is so relatable.
Oh, it's so true.
Right.
Sometimes people will nod and smile even if they haven't fully understood what you're saying, just to avoid holding things up or feeling embarrassed.
Yeah, or because they don't want to seem like they're not keeping up.
Totally, and it's a natural response.
Of course.
But it can cause bigger problems later on if they miss something crucial.
Absolutely. Instead of just asking, did you understand? Which can put someone on the spot,
Yeah, it can feel kind of awkward.
Yeah, exactly. The article suggests that we try offering clarification proactively.
Okay, so like rephrase what you said in a different way.
Yeah, you could say, just to make sure we're on the same page, what I meant was,
Yeah,
and then explain it again using different words.
that's a good tip.
And also just creating a culture where people feel comfortable asking questions.
That's so important.
Yeah, instead of assuming everyone understands everything,
Yeah.
make it clear that it's okay and even expected to ask for clarification if something is unclear.
Right, create that open communication.
Exactly.
Okay, and that actually leads us right into tip number 2, which is vary your vocabulary. And I love how the article ties this back to that credit card anecdote.
Right.
Imagine if the rep had just asked, is this your card or someone else's?
Right.
It's so simple.
Such a simple change. But it would have avoided all that confusion.
Totally.
And it really highlights how so much of effective communication, especially across languages, is about meeting people where they are linguistically.
So basically ditching the jargon and opting for clearer, more universally understood language.
Exactly.
Okay, so simpler words, basically.
Well, sometimes it's not just about simplifying, but about using different words altogether.
Oh,
Like if someone seems lost, you can try rephrasing using synonyms or explaining the concept with a real-world example, something you can relate to.
I
Make it more concrete.
I like that. And speaking of real-world examples, the article gives a great one about explaining a complex workplace concept,
Yeah.
like accountability for deliverables.
Oh, yeah, that's a mouthful.
Right.
And they suggest instead of using that phrase, you could say something like, essentially it means we all need to take responsibility for finishing our tasks on time and to the standard we all agreed on.
See, that's so much clearer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And tip number 3 is short and sweet, throttle back.
In other words, slow down.
Yeah.
We all have
Yeah.
our natural speaking pace,
Yeah.
but it's so important to be mindful of it, especially when we're talking to people who are speaking a different language.
Right.
Even slowing down just a little bit can make a huge difference in how well they understand us.
It's funny how we don't even realize how fast we're talking sometimes.
Oh, I know. So, but like we're on autopilot.
Until someone points it out and you're like, oh, wow, I guess I do talk pretty fast.
Exactly. But with a little bit of awareness and effort, we can adjust our pace to make sure our message is getting across clearly.
Right. And you don't have to speak super slowly like you're talking to a little kid.
No, not at all.
Just being a little more deliberate, especially when you're explaining key points, can make a big difference.
Exactly.
Okay, so tip number 4 is admire the accomplishment. And I think this one is often overlooked.
It really is.
You know, it's so easy to forget how much effort goes into speaking another language.
Especially in a professional setting.
Right. Like it's not just about memorizing vocabulary and grammar rules.
It's about navigating a whole new cultural landscape,
Right.
understanding unspoken cues,
Hmm.
and constantly switching back and forth between different ways of thinking and interacting.
Code switching is what that's called, right?
Yes, exactly.
It's fascinating.
It is.
And it must be so tiring.
For someone who's still learning English, that level of code switching can be mentally exhausting.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So when we acknowledge someone's efforts to communicate in English, we're not just being polite. We're recognizing their skill and resilience.
That's a great point. And a simple compliment can go a long way.
Absolutely. Like you could say, your English is fantastic, or I'm really impressed by how well you're able to express yourself.
I like that.
Even just asking about their language learning journey can be a great way to show genuine interest and build rapport.
Yeah, make them feel comfortable and seen.
Exactly.
It's crazy how much we're learning, right? Like all these things we never even think about.
Now it's like we're so used to communicating in our own little bubble,
Right, and we don't realize how much effort other people are putting in just to keep up.
especially when you think about code switching, like you were saying before.
Yeah.
I mean, how tiring that must be.
Is there any research on like the actual cognitive load that it puts on people?
There's this study that was published in the Journal of Experimental Psychology, and they found that bilinguals who code switch a lot, they actually show increased activity in their prefrontal cortex,
That's interesting.
which is the part of the brain that's responsible for like executive functions,
Yeah.
attention working, memory, all that stuff.
Right.
So basically it means they're working harder than monolinguals just to have the same conversation.
Wow, that's really
It
fascinating.
really highlights that we shouldn't underestimate the effort involved.
Yeah, like it's not just about language, it's about actual brain power.
Exactly. And it goes back to that point about admiring the accomplishment.
Right.
Like a simple compliment or just acknowledging someone's journey can go a long way in making them feel seen and valued.
It's about shifting our perspective, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Like instead of expecting them to just adapt to us, we should be recognizing the effort they're making.
Right. It's about creating a culture of inclusivity where everyone feels comfortable expressing themselves.
Even if their English isn't perfect.
Exactly.
You know, this reminds me of something I read about the economic benefits of multilingualism in the workplace.
Oh, yeah.
Apparently, companies that embrace linguistic diversity tend to be more innovative and successful.
That makes sense.
Mm.
There's a study by McKinsey and Company,
Okay.
and they found that companies that were in the top quartile for like ethnic and cultural diversity,
Mm-hmm.
they were 35% more likely to have financial returns above their national industry medians.
So it's not just about being nice or politically correct.
Right.
There's like a real business case for this.
Absolutely. When people feel safe and respected, they're more likely to share their ideas, collaborate effectively,
Mm.
really contribute their unique talents.
I like that. And the article ends with this joke that I thought was really funny.
Okay, let's hear it.
What do you call someone who speaks 3 languages?
Trilingual.
What do you call someone who speaks two languages?
Bilingual.
What do you call someone who speaks one language?
American.
I know, right? Yeah. It's funny because it's true.
It is, we often have this blind spot when it comes to our own linguistic privilege.
Like, we don't have to worry about whether people will understand our accent.
Right, or if we'll be able to find the right words in a stressful situation.
It's easy to take that for granted.
And it can lead to these unconscious biases where we just assume
Yeah,
everyone should be able to communicate as easily as we do.
This whole conversation has been really eye-opening.
It has.
Like, it's a call to action to be more mindful of our own privilege and to make an effort to be more inclusive.
And to really support our colleagues who are navigating all these complexities.
Right. It's about recognizing that communication is a two-way street.
A shared responsibility.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some key takeaways that our listeners can start implementing right away? Like, where do we even begin to put all this into practice?
I think the most important thing is awareness.
Okay.
Like, the next time you're talking to someone who's not a native English speaker, just take a moment to think about how you can make the communication clearer and more inclusive.
Like trying to see things from their perspective.
Exactly, like what would make them feel more comfortable and confident.
That's a good point. And it's not just about avoiding jargon or speaking slowly, right?
Right, it's about creating a space where people feel safe to ask questions, to clarify things, you know, even to laugh at themselves if they make a mistake.
That safe space is so important.
It really is, because it encourages open dialogue and genuine connection, which is ultimately what good communication is all about.
And remember, clear communication benefits everyone,
Exactly.
not just non-native English speakers.
When we're all on the same page, things just run more smoothly.
Totally. Projects get done faster. Teams are more cohesive. You know, we avoid misunderstandings.
It's a win-win for everyone.
This has been a really insightful deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much.
Me too. It's a good reminder that communication is an ongoing process,
Like, we're always learning and adapting.
and that even small changes can make a big impact.
Okay, so before we go, is there anything else you want to add? Any final thoughts for our listeners as they try to put all this into practice in their own lives?
I think the most important thing is to approach these conversations with genuine curiosity and empathy.
Okay.
Remember, everyone's on their own unique language journey,
Right.
and we can all learn from each other.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, just approaching those conversations, you know, with curiosity and really trying to understand where they're coming from.
Yeah. You know, remember, clear communication isn't just about getting the information across.
Right.
It's about building relationships and understanding each other.
Absolutely. So for our listener out there, as you navigate all this in your own workplace or even in your personal life, remember those 4 key takeaways from the article.
Yeah, those were great.
Be mindful of those who might be faking it, you
Yeah.
know, vary your vocabulary to make sure things are clear, throttle back your pace. And I think most importantly, admire the accomplishment of those communicating in a language that's not their native tongue.
It's a huge accomplishment.
It really is.
And, you know, if you find yourself struggling to bridge the gap, don't be afraid to get creative.
Oh, that's a good point.
Like, think about using visual aids or real-world examples. Even a little bit of humor can help.
Yeah, make it more engaging.
Make it more accessible.
I like that it's about being resourceful and, you know, adaptable.
And humble.
Yeah.
You know, acknowledging that we don't have all the answers.
Right.
And we can always learn from each other.
That's so true. Well, this has been such a great deep dive. I feel like I have so many new tools now to navigate these kinds of situations.
Me too. It's been a really fantastic discussion.
Well, thanks for joining me on this journey of linguistic discovery.
My pleasure.
And to our listener, until next time, keep those conversations flowing, keep learning, and keep building bridges across languages and cultures.